But thank you all very much for joining. We've been really looking forward to this event, which is hosted by the IUA's Developing Technology Monitoring Group. So if you don't know me, my name is Tom Hughes. I'm a Senior Market Services Executive at the IUA. I'm joined by my colleague, Henry Morse-Davis, who's a Market Services Technician working on many of our developing technology issues alongside myself at the IUA. So before we get into the good stuff, we have a couple of pieces of housekeeping. We will be recording the event. Now, just take note that we'll probably be sending a link to that recording a week or so after the event, so just look out for that. And we will be running a couple of polls today, so do keep an eye out for those and get involved when they pop up on your screen. And of course, there will be plenty of opportunity for Q&A. We will have a panel style session in the second half. So, get involved. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And we've got lots of excellent speakers to field your questions. Now, of course, we are actually exactly 1 year on from the launch of ChatGPT 3.5. And we thought that's a very good excuse for us to convene and take the opportunity to have a little bit of a chat around AI. Now, to set the scene, we wanted to introduce a definition, and we thought, why not ask ChatGPT, of course, other AI systems that are available, to provide us with an AI definition in the context of insurance. So the definition we received was artificial intelligence refers to the development of computer systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. In the context of the insurance industry, AI enables machines to analyze data, make informed decisions, and continuously learn from experiences. It's not about creating machines with human-like consciousness, but rather empowering systems to process information, identify patterns, and enhance decision-making processes. And I probably couldn't have put it any better myself, so I was quite impressed with the definition that we were provided with. So we'll, of course, be exploring the topic of AI. You'll note that we'll be focusing on the risks, the opportunities, and practical implementation. Now, we have two core focuses at IUA when we look at any form of evolving or new technology. We tend to look at insurers' own use of the technology, how they can harness it to improve their processes, but also how it will change the underlying insured risk across the various classes of business from which our members are made up. Now, the session today, you'll note, is 1 hour and 15 minutes. We're going to start with 5 brief presentations from our speakers, taking us to about 35 minutes, and then approximately 25 minutes of panel debate, which Henry is very kindly going to oversee. And then we'll be closing at 10:45 promptly. Now, turning to our speakers, we have a fantastic lineup. I'm really pleased that you've all been able to join us. We'll start with George Beattie, who's Head of Innovation at CFC Underwriting, Neve McConville, Head of Claims Operations at Generali, Mahesh Hariharan, Founder and CEO at Supervise, Daniel West, Partner at Waitmans, and Jonathan Davis, who's Data Science Lead in the CDO function, UK Operations at Zurich. So thank you all very much for taking the time to join us. Now, to get everyone warmed up and in the AI spirit, and to give our speakers a little bit of food for thought, we're going to run a couple of quick polls. So Tony, if you could very kindly put the first poll on screen. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can all see what I can see, which is a question that says, which of these AI risks for insurers are you most concerned about? Now we have here bias in outcomes, cybersecurity and data leaks. I think we've got cybersecurity and data leaks in twice there. So just respond to one of those. Misuse and commercial crime, job displacement and economic impacts, and then AI hallucination, the concept of AI generating believable but incorrect information. So we'll just hold on a moment or two. Allow you to make your responses. Okay, hopefully everyone is nearly there. Tony, if we could take a look at the outcomes. Okay, so people managed to answer both those questions, which is fantastic. So looking at the areas of most concern, now it looks like hallucination is pretty high up the order there alongside cybersecurity and data leaks. Of least concern, job displacement and economic impacts, which I think is very interesting. And then looking down to question two, which of these do you see as the biggest AI opportunities for insurers? Of course, an equally important topic. We can see that I think the most substantial opportunity that people have pointed to is risk assessment and underwriting, and then claims processing and automation, two topics that we will be taking a very close look at in the coming presentations. So thank you all very much for that. Gives you a little bit of flavor of the session today. Might be worth pointing out that when we asked ChatGPT to rate these various concerns and opportunities, the greatest concern that ChatGPT pointed to was bias in outcomes, followed by cybersecurity and data leaks, and then explainability and transparency issues. Whereas on the opportunity side, it considered that fraud detection and prevention was possibly the greatest opportunity for insurers, followed by the predictive and preventative measures for insured assets, and then in third place, risk assessment and underwriting. So thank you all very much for that. And now we'll get into the crux of the presentation. So George, we're going to start with you to take us through some of the opportunities of AI to support an effective underwriting process. And I think you're going to take a little look at some of the products that might be out there available to ensure AI.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, hopefully everyone can hear me. Sorry, I'm on my phone because of a system problem. Good timing. So I'm going to concentrate mainly on the kind of product side of things. So I think we're all aware that AI is poised to become a major risk and a major sort of issue for earnings volatility for companies globally. When considering AI products in an insurance context, I think we need to divide things into kind of two sections. The first is how current products can respond to AI risks, and the second is how new products may be required to respond to those risks that aren't adequately covered by existing solutions. I know that's a really obvious place to start, but I do think it would be worth segmenting things in that way and being sure that we can be particular about how we spend our time. So when we're doing this exercise, we need to bear a few things in mind. AI exposures affect two key categories of companies. We might define AI creators as AI companies like OpenAI that sell an AI product, and then AI users, which is frankly everyone else that might be using AI in their business. Now, the perception of the risks and the requirements of each of these different types of companies is very different and very important to bear in mind. Companies, just like people, I'm going to be a bit controversial here, don't like buying insurance very much. So it's safest for us to assume as insurance people that actually AI companies in either camp, either AI users or AI creators, will aim for the cheapest coverage that ticks the box. And so we need to be really careful not to fall into a classic innovation trap, which is coming up with really smart sounding insurance products that insurance people love and that no one wants to buy. So my personal take is that whether due to knowledge or lack of knowledge, many companies using AI or creating AI will not struggle in the very near term to get staple coverages from the market, like cyber. However, I think we will start to see losses feeding through that people haven't accounted for. And we'll start to see the emergence of demand for specialized AI solutions. I think you can look at a corollary of what happened in the cyber market. At the beginning of that market, there was a lot of debate about whether cyber would grow into its own thing, whether it would continue to be catered for in the property market. And actually, it was the rising incidence of cyber claims that led to the kind of separation of that into a separate topic. You don't have to go back very far. Even back 10 years ago, people were still debating what the direction was going to be for cyber. And look where we are today. I think the evolution of that from an AI perspective will be even kind of faster. So let's just visit some of the questions as to what kind of risk could be covered by existing products today, and then where the kind of edges are where people might want to explore where products might come in. Current coverages like product liability and cyber risk do cover some AI risks, right? It's worth starting at that point. These primarily include privacy and security concerns like data breaches, cyber attacks, and unauthorized AI system access. Traditional product liability insurance may also cover property damage and bodily injury caused by AI technologies. The open question I would have there as to whether insurers in those markets are prepared to pay those claims or have even seen them coming. So that leads us to kind of an emergence of some specialized AI insurance products on the edges. Traditional policies like these will often fall short in comprehensively addressing these risks. They may not, for example, adequately address things like algorithmic liability or legal challenges surrounding AI-based decision making systems, right, where bias may sneak in and may cause companies to incur liability they didn't foresee. I think that, you know, in terms of future trends, right, what we might see next, the wider market is shifting from a kind of reactive detect and repair to a proactive kind of predict and prevent model for insurance products in general. And I think AI will feed through in that. So it's not just as a risk context, it's also as in terms of how we deliver these products. I think that regulators are going to be continually scrutinizing AI, and that's going to cause some pressure in these traditional coverages. I think that might feed through some edge issues that we can actually address for new products. The other point I'd like to raise is that AI models can be appraised. They are subject to efficiency parameters. Where those efficiencies fail, there could be some room for warranty or guarantee type products. And we've seen a few of those feed through in the Lloyd's lab, for example. I think that's really kind of interesting. So look, to summarize, we've looked at some of the kind of high level considerations when looking at how we might break this down from a kind of product perspective, right? It's really important that before we get started, we have really good situational intelligence. There is absolutely no good innovation that comes out of a lack of situational intelligence. We have to understand this topic. We have to move beyond the convenience of the term AI to actually break down these models, break down their applications in industries to work out how we can be relevant. And so ultimately, by doing this, we'll figure out where the risks fall into three different camps. Unacceptable risks that require coverage exclusion in today's products. Second, acceptable edge risks that require endorsement into those coverages. And thirdly, acceptable frontier risks, let's call them frontier risks, that require new product innovation. So we had to break down the terminology and then look at how it applies to our clients and then work out what our priorities should be.
Thank you very much, George, as a very nice opening for us. So we'll move on to our next slightly different perspective. You'll hear 5 in total, and we're turning to Niamh, who's very kindly going to take us through the role that AI can play in claims handling functions whilst maintaining a human in the loop. And it's a very important topic that we are considering at IUA at present. We have a claim strategy committee that essentially is made up of various heads of claims across our member community. So we are very, very keen to hear from you on this one, Niamh. So take it away.
Thank you. So first of all, before I get into AI, I think that any opportunity to develop is incredible and something that we should be doing. So whether your solution is AI, soft skills training, process reviews, I think it's all valuable. You may not be at the AI stage, and that's okay. So when we start to look at the opportunities available to use AI, it's comparative to Willy Wonka creating his chocolate factory. The ideas that you can have are endless. You can bring them in. Some of them will be fantastic and some might leave you like Violet Boulevard. So when I'm going to talk today, I'm going to be able to touch on some of them, but each type of insurance is going to be different. Each of our clients are different, so please bear that in mind. Where I'm going to start is actually looking at a data-driven product. So my other hat is the head of parametric claims at Generali as well. So I'm going to speak a bit about parametric insurance. So as a fairly new product, it's in the perfect position to really take AI from start to finish and see the capabilities of it. So for those who don't know, when we go out for the underwriting stage of a parametric policy, an insured is presented with their loss scenarios, all based on data points, and they can select which data is relevant to them, is at the point where they feel the risk is necessary. What makes it perfect then from a claims perspective is that there's a very clear trigger that is hit. Data is then produced, which is not biased. It's been agreed by the insured at the underwriting stage. When it comes to the claim, that's it. That's the data. This is your calculation and payout. So it's a very straight through claims process and very quick. So it really puts into question of, is a claims handler needed in a parametric claims policy? There's a lot of it where I would sort of argue no. You could probably get away with not having a handler at all involved in it. But from actually doing the work and seeing some intricacies involved, it's not a complete statement that we could say. And what really it shows is that for a data-driven product, we can reduce the need for a significantly skilled handler to having just a smaller amount of those who can pick up those nuanced cases. Now, if I switch and look at the more traditional indemnity products, AI is not actually that new. We've been using it for a number of years. Obviously, there's the ChatGPT and everything, but you already probably use AI, whether in chatbots, in IoTs, in fraud detection. So these aren't new principles. These are something that actually are quite well trusted, I think, within the industry, and lots of different suppliers have used them and got them. If we flip that and start to look at how we use it for our handlers, I'm hoping that a lot of you have seen the CII article that came out end of last week, start of this week, which talks about how we switch AI to IA, so the intelligent assistant. This is really what AI was supposed to be in the first place. It's not meant to replace everyone and take everything away. I think it reduces the fear of it realistically. But the capabilities that we could look at there are brilliant, such as like reading large documents, pulling out information so you're not scanning through everything. Or if we could have an insurance compliant ChatGPT style tool, I'm not aware of one that I would have confidence in currently to help make some of those liability decisions and conversations. I think would be useful. Saying that, I don't think currently we're at a stage where a Gen AI tool could actually make those decisions, and they may just be something to a starter for 10 more than a final conclusion for conversations. So there are the real benefits of speeding up the process, having a more customer-centric claims experience, but that's all the nice, glossy, shiny side of things. If we actually go into the considerations, these are things that I don't think should be blockers. There's things that we should be looking to deep dive into to make sure we're providing the best customer experience and a very fair product. So if one of those is definitely, can AI be empathetic? I would argue currently, no, because if we look at the likes of Alexa, Siri, these are tools that are getting thousands, millions of pieces of data every day, and they still get compared to a medical condition called alexithymia, which is when someone can't actually sympathize with emotions or empathize with emotions. So if these tools are getting so much more data and they can't do it, do we really expect a design from an insurance company to be able to provide that empathy? I don't think we're at that stage yet. But the question that it brings in there is, do claims have to be empathetic? If I go back to looking at parametrics, I would argue no, they want the fast payout. Feedback that we've had from brokers or clients are more talking about speed, fast decision making. But that's from the corporate and commercial world. I definitely think when you look into SMEs, personal lines, yes, you are going to want that sort of empathetic approach. So you can have AI to help along the process, but I think being able to bring it in and out, so that people can decide when they want that human empathy versus when they just want a straight through process. I'm currently a member of a working group that we're hoping to go out at the start of next year, hopefully, looking at a code of conduct for claims in AI. And while I don't always agree with the UK government, they have a similar one that states that AI should be developed for the common good and the benefit of humanity. And the principles of this group is very similar. We're looking at some of those things that Tom actually mentioned in the poll, but like about safety, security, transparency, fairness, governance, and contestability of AI, which I all think are really good. I'm not going to have time to deep dive into those, but they're things to consider. Overall, I think it's a fascinating conversation about AI. I'm always keen to learn more. So if there's anyone out there who knows more than me, please let me know. But I think what we should be doing is that we should be working together, learning from each other, but especially internally. As George sort of said, there's different products that could come out. Please don't forget about your claims process when you're designing these new products. Make sure that we follow through and we know what's happening. Or if we've got a AI solution that we're going to bring in, I think it's important that we let our customers know at the start that there is going to be an AI tool involved, so that they can make the decision and they know how we're going to be working with them. So very fascinating, but that's what I've got for you.
Thank you, Neve. That's excellent. And certainly from an association perspective, we can sign up to the idea that collaboration is key. The sharing of ideas and knowledge is, inevitably we will all be impacted in some way as AI starts making its way into the insurance sector. I like the idea of the IA, the intelligent assistant. It probably makes it feel a little bit more manageable to start adopting AI than thinking about some of the more complex advanced forms of AI that will really make tangible differences in future. Okay, well, we'll turn our attention now to you, Mahesh, and I know you're going to talk to us a little bit about AI risk observability, thinking about black box governance and really mitigating some of the risks at hand that we're starting to draw out. So please take it away, Mahesh. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. So just by way of introduction, I run Zupowise. We are a risk transparency platform specifically designed for AI governance. And what we are trying to do today is to figure out how do we quantify AI risk in monetary terms. Because obviously you can't manage something you can't measure. So going back to what George said initially, if you look at parallels between the cyberspace, the cyber insurance industry, and what's happening from an AI exposure perspective, there are a lot of things to learn in terms of modeling, identifying risk, quantifying it so that the business is on the same page. So I've just put together a couple of slides that I want to walk you through today. Unless you've been under a rock, you've been looking about all these things that's coming up in the news about AI safety, transparency, regulatory moves around AI, ChatGPT and its risks, hallucination, which everybody polled on, and the risks about using AI for multiple use cases. So if you look at AI risk as a lens, there are multiple aspects, how you slice and dice it. So if you look at it from a strategic board perspective, from a senior management standpoint, you're looking at it from a competition standpoint, you're looking at it from a go-to-market perspective, looking at it from a sustainability angle. If you look at operational risks, you're looking at things like bias mitigation, things like quality concerns, bias removal, figuring out hallucination risk, quantifying hallucination by using new metrics like Rouge or Blue, and figuring out how do you audit AI and how do you look at the security side of AI, especially because AI learns with lots of data. And with generative AI, there's obviously the foundational model, and then there's the final model that you build on your own, which is a combination of prompt tuning, fine-tuning the models, using plugins, and coming up with a derived version. So there is an entire industry called LLM Ops, which is about streamlining the way AI is built and deployed. And risk mitigation needs to happen at every single stage of the value chain. And then you have regulatory risks. So these are the kind of risks that you might be concerned about from a solvency perspective or from a regulatory angle. And then from a legal standpoint, which I'm sure Daniel will talk about later on, we need to be concerned about privacy, proportionality of how much of personal data are you going to collect in order to derive a decision. How do you look at safeguarding those risks? Copyright issues have come up now because most of these foundation models, the large ones at least, have been trained on publicly available data, which may or may not be copyrighted, and that brings in unique challenges. So from a lens perspective, if you look at it from different angles, it's fairly multidisciplinary in nature. So you got to figure out how do you evaluate these risks, donning different hats at different times. And that brings in the concept of risk observability. So what is observability? Observability is basically monitoring the inputs and the outputs of the model from a data perspective, from a training standpoint, from a human-in-the-loop standpoint, and figuring out from an analytical perspective, what does it mean in order to measure these metrics and figure out the change in these metrics and get alerted on that basis. So without getting too technical, what you need is a robust framework. So unless until you have a framework in mind, which is derived from principles, which is derived from governance structures, which is derived from a responsible AI policy, that's where you start with in the first place, you need to ensure that you are quantifying the risks at each and every aspect of the AI ecosystem. So you start out with the data, then look at the model, then look at the pipeline, then look at deployment and outcomes. So what is important is not just the operational aspect. Impact is quite interesting here because you're just not looking at what data goes in, data goes out. You're also looking at what sort of disparate impact AI can bring to the mix. So we came up with what we call as the AI risk quantification workflow. This allows us to do safety modeling and come up with a score from a risk mitigation perspective. This allows the business to identify what is the value at risk and almost use the same analogy that cyber risk quantification uses by using libraries like factor analysis, information risk, or Monte Carlo simulation, and the likes to come up with a risk score. And what we are trying to do today is to come up with a single pane of glass view that allows everyone to be on the same page in terms of risk exposure, because that leads to better conversations in terms of risk mitigation, better conversations in terms of impact analysis, better conversations in terms of controls, identifying this on the same page. And we at ZupoEyes are trying to do this with the insurance industry, and we would welcome your inputs and discussions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. That was incredibly helpful to set the scene on some of the measures that can be put in place when we look at managing the risks that AI will pose. So we've of course worked our way now across some of the opportunities from an underwriting, products and claims perspective, thought a little bit about the risk and risk management, and now we're going to take a look at some of the liability issues. And I'll pass to you, Daniel. We've of course spent a bit of time in the past talking about AI in the context of connected and automated vehicles, and I know you're going to take a look at the overview of liability and regulation in the UK and EU in the context of AI more broadly. So I'll pass over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So I'm a product liability lawyer, so my interest in AI is fairly narrow in scope, but it's a point that's been touched on by George and Mahesh already, which is this idea that AI, when put to use, could cause real world harm of the type that could trigger a product liability policy. So we're talking about the scope for it to cause personal injury and property damage, and in particular, whether our traditional historical product liability laws might need updating to deal with modern technologies like AI, like software, like algorithms, and the things that they're going to be incorporated into, like automated vehicles and med tech and machinery. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking through, very briefly, the ways our product liability laws might struggle to deal with something like AI, and what the EU and the UK are doing about this, if anything. So first of all, I thought I'll try not to make this a law lecture as much as possible, but I thought it might just be useful to look at where our product liability comes from and when it comes from as well. So product liability in the UK has three sources. The first is negligence, and that takes us all the way back to the seminal case of Donoghue and Stevenson. That's from 1932. It was actually a product liability case because it involved a bottle of ginger beer. I'm pretty sure that the courts and the country weren't really giving much thought to artificial intelligence at that time. We've then got contract law and the law relating to the sale of goods, particularly the Sale of Goods Act, which is an act from 1979. And we've got the most significantly, we've got the Consumer Protection Act, which was introduced in 1987. So aside from one caveat, which I will mention later on, we can see that product liability law hasn't really been updated for the best part of 40 years. And again, when they were introducing the Consumer Protection Act in the 80s, I don't think they had artificial intelligence in mind. I don't think they had software in mind. I don't think they had the idea of downloading something in mind. So thinking about the ways that our law might struggle in that context to deal with artificial intelligence. Well, just picking up on a few points, that there's been a question for a number of years about whether our product liability laws even cover something like artificial intelligence? And the reason that's a question is because the CPA talks about products, contract law talks about goods. It's not very clear whether that's limited to tangible physical things that you can touch and hold in your hands, or whether it is it also includes non-tangible things like software, like something like an algorithm or AI. There is a case from the 90s where this question was asked in the context of a company selling a piece of software to another company. The way that it was sold was it was brought over on a disk, and the court said that is a good for the purpose of contract law because it came on a disk. But if it hadn't come on a disk, it wouldn't have been a good in the way that we traditionally think of it. And so that the company wouldn't have had the protections afforded by the Sale of Goods Act, for example. More recently, the UK government introduced the Consumer Rights Act in 2015. They seem to have been very live to this issue about goods versus software. And so they introduced the concept of digital content, and they gave a separate section to digital content. But that was almost an acknowledgement that goods did not include digital content, because if it did, you wouldn't need a separate section for it. So and other problems arise because in any product liability case, you're always going to be talking about the safety of a product. And that's typically assessed at the time that the product is put on the market, not later on when it causes harm. That makes a lot of sense when you're talking about something tangible and physical. But when you're talking about something that can be updated and can change over time, so a company can send out a software update, or it might change itself through machine learning, and it might become defective later on, having been supplied in a safe state. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to assess safety at the time that it's supplied. There needs to be a bit more of a flexible approach from that point of view. Similarly, our current rules around limitation aren't very flexible. So if something did become unsafe at a later point after it had been supplied, there isn't really a very clear answer to whether the limitation will start to run from the point it became unsafe, or whether you still have to go back to the date it was supplied. And then lastly, on the ways that product liability laws don't really necessarily fit the bill for this kind of thing, we also have an argument, at least, that claimants are going to face a bit of an uphill struggle proving that something like an AI was defective or unsafe, just because of the sheer complexity of what we're talking about. The fact that when an AI makes a decision, it can often do that in quite an opaque way, in a way that's not easily explainable, and also because you might be reliant on information that is ultimately held by a defendant producer, and who may not be willing to show you their algorithm or the way that their AI makes decisions, and may provide the information in a way that's not easily understandable. So what's the EU doing about all of this? I'm going to start with the EU just because they're further ahead than us by quite some margin. They have introduced a number of bits of legislation that are coming through the pipework. There's the AI Act, there's a revised product liability directive, there's an AI liability directive, all of which are designed to address regulating AI and introducing a liability regime for AI and other bits of new technology. Looking specifically at the revised product liability directive, we again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we can see that there's lots of features of it that are designed to address new technologies like AI. We have a wider definition of what a product is and a very clear indication that it's going to include, at least from the implementation of this introduction of this act, that it's going to include software, it's going to include software updates, and it's going to include AI systems. We have a wider definition of what a defect is, and more things that a court would need to consider when considering defect, including the interconnectedness with other products, which I'm sure is a reference to smart products and the Internet of Things, and the ability of products to learn, and the ability of producers to update products after they have been unleashed on the world. And then finally, there's this, quite significantly for claimants, there is a reverse burden of proof where something like an AI has failed in some way, and almost a presumption of defectiveness where it's going to be too hard for the claimant to prove defect because of the scientific complexity of the product, or because the defendant is withholding disclosure. Then finally, what is the UK doing about it? Well, there's been a few calls for evidence from the Office for Product Safety and Standards, that's the OPSS, which is a fairly new government body. That's first in 2021, they put out a call for evidence on the subject of reforming product safety and liability. They recognized at the time this theoretical possibility for AI to cause real-world harm. They said that they seem to accept a new liability regime might be needed. They said they were working with the government on this, and then all went very, very quiet for a few years until August this year, when the government published a Smarter Regulation UK Product Safety Review. And we all thought, great, they've been working with the government, as they said, and they're going to come up with some proposals. But they didn't. They just wanted another consultation on the same problem. The general gist of the narrative in that report is, yes, there's a problem. They seem to be blaming it on outdated EU laws. They're going to sort it out with the benefit of our new sovereign parliamentary system, but they can't really say what they're going to do about it just yet. Specifically to AI, there was a paper produced in August 2023, a pro-innovation approach to AI regulation, where the general gist from that is there's a problem. We're not quite sure what we're going to do about it yet. It's all a bit too complex. But what we can say is we're going to be pro-business, and it's going to be quite a light touch approach to regulating AI. So no real answers at the stage, a recognition that our product liability laws might not be up to scratch, suggestions that we should do something about it. And at least if we stick, to the extent we'll stick with the current government, a push towards a lighter, more business-friendly approach, differing from the approach of the EU. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Daniel. It's very helpful to set that regulatory scene, and we'll, of course, be keeping a very close eye on developments in the coming months.